Let's take a listen to these raw unedited drums. So you can hear that it's a pretty good performance, but it could do with tightening up, especially in a genre like this, where it's fast. They're pretty good, but you can hear how the timing's sort of swaying in and out. So we want to make sure this is far more on the grid with this kind of genre, but we also want to retain the performance and feel of the drums. We don't just want to chop it all up completely, because we may as well have used programmed drums if we're going to take that approach. As a lot of musicians these days, me included, record and mix their songs in a small home studio or even a bedroom, I thought I'd make this video mini-series on how to get the best drums when working in these environments. And in this video specifically, how to get the best out of real live drums, like these here that were recorded by someone on Fiverr. So this video will focus on editing these drums using Logic. Okay, so the first prerequisite is we're going to gate our drums before we do anything else, because that way we're going to help Logic determine what are transients in the kick and snare mics, etc., and what's bleed. So I use Silencer, to me the best one out there at the moment, the best drum gate. Set to kick, so we'll quickly make sure that it's only opening on kick hits. Yeah, there we go. So the bleed is mostly suppressed when that's engaged. So we'll quickly do that for all the tracks, and then I will bounce that down so we can just start fresh. So once I'm happy with the gate on each drum, or bounce in place, I'll call it kick in, set to mute the original track, and I'll do that for each of them. Okay, prerequisite number 2 then. Now that we've committed all our tracks with that drum gate on them, we're now going to create a drum group so that every cut and edit we make will be made across all of the tracks in one go. Okay, so in the mixer window, we're going to highlight all the drum tracks. And then here in this little space where you can see group, I'm going to click in there and then select group 1 new. Now you'll see they all have group 1 there. Then we're going to click that again, open group settings. And here we want to make sure that groups active is ticked. And we want to make sure that editing is ticked also, and then quantize locked audio. So that ensures that the phase relationship between all the tracks will stay the same as we cut and move things around. So let's bring up this step by step that I've got prepared here. And you'll see that step 1 is to turn groups off. So click on that group window, open group settings, turn them off, just while we want to detect the transients on individual tracks. Okay, and going back to our step-by-step guide, step 2 is detect transients of kick and snare. So let's double-click the kick drum mic here, this kick-in track, then ensuring that file here is selected and not track. Make sure it's file. Go over to the left, audio file, and then detect transients. And it was going to auto-detect all the kick hits. But as you can see here, it's actually thinking we've got one here when we don't. Here it thinks we've got one here, an extra one there. So we actually want to make it less sensitive. So this minus button up here will bring us back. Yeah, it looks a bit better to roughly where we want to be. Now you can see every kick hit here, for the most part, has been detected correctly. What we do now is we go through this and we make sure that there are no missed triggers. Yeah, that's looking pretty healthy. So we'd go through the whole song, check every single one, remove anything that wasn't added, and add our own ones in if there was anything that was missed. Okay, now usually that would be good, but we're dealing with fast music here, 200 BPM, lots of quick kick hits. And actually, when we come to slice all the audio tracks at these transient markers, so every single time one of these transient hits for the kick and the snare, we're going to cut every single track at that point. And these really quick kick hits here is going to cause us a lot of headaches. So I'm going to select the eraser tool and I'm actually going to remove the transient markers where there's quick kicks in succession. And this also helps us retain the natural feel of the drummer too, while ensuring that the drums are going to be mostly on the grid. So as you look here, if you have a listen, I'll play this bit, you'll hear the 1, 2, 3 kicks in this section here and here. They're really fast. And we just want to cut at the first one. We don't want to have to cut each individual kick hit in those points. Let me show you. So those 3 there, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that's going to cause us a nightmare. So instead, we'll remove those, but we'll just keep the first one. And we want to do that throughout the whole song. So we'll skip through and remove any of those quick succession kick hits. And just make sure that we leave the first one of each one in there. So that's the first one's always starting on the grid, and the others will fall where they fall as the drummer played them. And we get to retain that natural feel, which is cool, which is why you want these live drums, right? Okay, so having done that for the kick, we're going to double click the snare one now. Do the same thing, ensure it's on file, audio file, detect transients. Then we're going to go through and make sure there's no missed triggers or anything missing. Yeah, so they look pretty good. Now the same rules apply here as for the kick. There's going to be some snare rolls, fills and quick bits happening. We don't want to cut those because it's going to, again, kill the feel of the drummer, make loads of edits, give us a bit of a headache. So we're going to remove all of the quick ones and just keep those main snare hits on there. There, that 3 there, those 1, 2, 3. We only need the first one. So we'll remove all those quick ones. And you can see here we've got a bit of a like a 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of snare fill. Yes, let's hear what that sounds like. Yeah, very quick hits. We don't need those. We just want the one. So that's actually the first one. Even though it's quite quiet here, we want that first one and nothing else. We want to keep that natural roll that he had. So I'll go through this again and take out all those quick snare hits, leaving just the main ones in. And here we've got some flams coming up. Again, same rule applies. We just want the first hit. We want the second part of the flam to fall naturally where it did as the drummer played it. We don't want to force that to be perfectly on the grid either. So we'll kill that second hit there, which is just the end part of that flam. Yeah, so have a listen here so you see what I mean where we're leaving that second flam hit without a marker. Yeah, you get the idea. Okay, so that's step 2 complete, detecting the transients in the kick and snare mics. So next up, we'll go back to our step-by-step. We want to turn groups back on. So we'll tick that group's active up there again. And I want to draw your attention to these Q buttons here. And what they're actually saying is that they're where Logic wants to take its reference points from. So at the moment, every single track is selected. If we were to detect transients for all of those drums and then sliced all of these tracks up at those transients, every single one of them would be taking the lead and causing cuts to happen across all 8 tracks. That's probably not a great way of describing it, but what we effectively want to do is turn them off for everything other than the kick and snare. And like I said before, if you had some hi-hats or toms that were leading the tempo of the song, you'd keep those in for those too. But for the purposes of this demonstration and for this song, it's the kick and snare that we really want to have define our tempo. Okay, back to our step-by-step, and we're on step 5 now, which is turn on flex and select slicing. Now, I know I said we're not going to use flex, and we're not using flex. We just have to turn it on for this next step because otherwise you don't get the option that I want to use. So we'll turn flex on at the top here, and then where it says monophonic, or whatever it says for you, whatever it defaults to, we want to change that to slicing just for this next part where we're going to cut everything. Now, as you can see, all those white lines have detected all those transients. If we had those cues turned on for every single drum, it would be, Logic would cut every single one of those white lines across all 8 tracks. So we don't want that. We just want what we manually put in for kick and snare, which is why we've only got the cues on here for the kick and the snare mic. So with that done, we want to slice at transient markers. Okay, so now I control click and go to slice at transient markers. Now, if we hadn't turned flex on, that option wouldn't show up for us, which is why we've had to turn it on just for this. So let's click that and let Logic have a fit about how much processing it has to do. Okay, now that that's done, we can turn flex off. And if we enlarge the window here, you can now see that everything has been sliced at these transient markers for just the kick and snare. See how these tom ones here didn't cause any cuts. We've got the start of the snare runs and each kick hit has been sliced. So now we want to quantize what we've got here, but there's a couple of steps we need to do to ensure this goes well. So first of all, actually, if we go back to our step-by-step, the next is to switch snap to absolute value. So up here in the snap, where it's set to smart, we've got snap regions to relative value. We want snap regions to absolute value because we want those blocks that we've just cut to be where Logic quantizes. We want Logic to quantize based on where the cut is on this grid that we've made. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to highlight all of these up to the pre-chorus. I don't want to touch the chorus yet, so we're going to leave it there where it is. And then come up to the top right-hand side where there's the list editor. And on quantize, go to 1/8 note for this tempo. You might want to change this if it's 1/16 to be better. But for me, I think 1/8 is probably the best here. And you can see you could press the Q button, but it's already quantized them on the left. So it's now moved every single one of those hits to be in time to the grid. But you can see here we've got loads of overlaps, we've got gaps in the audio. And we need to smooth all that out, make sure everything is in place. There's not going to be any double hits happening. So let's go back to our step-by-step. And in fact, what we want to do now, as you can see there, is to drag the end of each region slightly forward. And this is going to give us some room for the next step. So let's zoom in a little bit here. As these are all selected, it should happen to every single region across all tracks. Grab the back of it and just drag it forward a little bit so that nothing is overlapping anymore. There we go. And the reason we've done that is for the next step, where we're going to drag the front where the cut has happened, just to reveal any part of transient that might be lost, because we don't want to. With drums, it's quick information. We don't want to cut off the very start of the hit. So we're just going to drag this back a little bit to make sure we're not losing that. There we go. So now we get into the cool bit, which actually stops us from having to use flex at all. So we've got all these gaps here. And it doesn't look like anything is overlapping, which is cool. But just in case, we can control click, go to trim, and then remove overlaps. There we go. And that just makes sure that nothing's overlapping for this next part here. So where everything's been quantized, we've revealed the transient now, and we've got rid of any potential overlaps. Zoom in a little bit so we can see it better. And then we are going to control click again, go back to trim, and then trim region start to previous region. And this is going to fill in all those gaps by effectively dragging the front of every region to the back of the one before it so that everything lines up. It's still not going to sound smooth just yet, but it's going to be a lot closer. And then Logic has another tantrum about how much processing we have to go. And there we are. So now everything is joined on. There may still be a couple of issues which we're going to have to iron out on an individual basis, but we're getting there. So now is a good idea to highlight everything again if you haven't already. And now if you look at our step-by-step again, we want to set the crossfade on each of these to smooth out each of these cuts. So under region here, the top left, if we go to type, we want equal power crossfade. We want fade in to something like 3 or 4 milliseconds because it's drums. We want it to be quick. So we'll do 4 for both. And now we're actually ready to have a listen and see if we've got any hard cuts or anything we need to smooth out on an individual basis. Let's hear this. Yeah, I think we're good. Let's have a quick listen with the track and make sure that it feels right. Okay, so if there was any issues like on an individual basis, like we can see here where the tail is faded into the hit before it, what you can do is the actual transient here is this snare here. So we don't really need to worry about that. We can drag this one back as far as we like and then go to the hit before it and go back to that trim that we had earlier. And then you've got trim region end to next region, which is the opposite of region start to previous region that we used before. So you can do that there. Now you've got that tail is no longer fading into itself. It's now coming out naturally. And you can do that with every individual hit that has an issue. But as you can see, as we listen through there's not that many. But once you're happy with everything, you can select all the hits that we've quantized so far, which if we go back to our step-by-step is the penultimate. So we're right towards the end here. Let's get all of these highlighted up to the chorus because that was where we stopped. And now we want to consolidate this, or in Logic terms, join. So right click, go to join and then join per track. Then Logic will have another fit because it's got a lot of processing to do. As you can see, it's just consolidating all those individual cuts. And we haven't had to pull or push anything with flex time and make it sound weird, ruin the phase relationship. Because trust me, once you start to mix that kind of stuff, even if you use the slicing algorithm, things sound weird and you can start to catch them with your ear and it's distracting. Here, we've kept the natural feel of the drummer and we've put everything in time and it sounds human, right? That's how you can take, like a drummer from Fiverr, get them to record their real drums. And then as a bedroom artist or someone who records at home, you can have live drums and it's only cost me, I think this was something like $30. I mean, that's incredible, right? So if you want to see other mixing tricks and tutorials on pop punk music and stuff like this, then head over to my channel. There's loads there. If you want to see how I'd go about mixing drums or program drums, and you can watch this video here. And like always, thank you very much for watching and I'll see you at the next one.